I thought this was really interesting to think about, like, well, what is our obsession and compulsions that children show? So this is giving a breakdown percent of children showing the symptoms. And as you can see, compulsions of washing or grooming are pretty common in a lot of kids. It's like 90%. Lots of rituals and checking doors and locks. And then we see that the most common symptom is most common obsession is dirt and germs. But even then, like things like having sexual thoughts that you don't want is actually, common in some of these children. Religious obsessions. I had a child who, what were her obsessions? Her obsessions were that the devil was coming to her. And so she had this intrusive thought about that. And so would compulsively pray. So it was like this back and forth and back and forth. And they actually dropped out of treatment really quickly because she felt that the praying really helped her, even though it was the early signs of OCD that were happening for this child, which was really quite sad. Oh, I'm back. So there are multiple biological factors that are involved in OCD. Things like having a genetic risk. So OCD runs in the family, that is something that happens. But they've really narrowed down that the basal ganglia is involved. So the basal ganglia is a group of structures that all deal with movement. So with like planning and coordinating movement. And so you have things like an obsession, you get that tension, and then your compulsion. So what you have to do to relieve that obsession. So it has to do with how your cortex is really talking to your basal ganglia back and forth. And we also know that there are serotonin pathways involved in OCD, which we'll get into when we talk about treatment. There's also cognitive things happening. So we were talking already about our appraisals, so our thought process and our appraisals. One of these things is also overestimation of threat. So it is thinking that something that is very unlikely to happen is going to happen. So this story by Lily Williams says, "I'm certain that if I sleep, I won't wake up. It's why I avoid sleepovers of kids and make excuses now. I have to get up early. So I developed a routine." So she has this obsession. I sleep, I won't wake. The routine is have to check the door 45 times, step on every kitchen tile corner, touch every corner of the couch, drink 5 sips of water, touch the doorway for 45 seconds, turn on and off the light 10 times, and put on chapstick 45 times. If I mess up this routine, I have to redo it over and over until I get it right, which can take hours. So you can see that you're kind of trapped by your OCD in estimating that there is this threat that's relatively unlikely, especially as you're a child, of going to sleep and then that you won't wake up. Your treatment of OCD is something called exposure and response prevention. So you're exposing somebody to the stimulus that makes them have an obsession. So that might be actually touching doorknobs and things that are covered in germs, for example, but you stop the response. So you stop whatever the compulsion is. So you have to sit there with your anxiety and feeling that anxiety of touching something that is germed. And so it's very similar to how we actually treat anxiety disorders. But I thought here it would be really interesting to talk about medications. So there are a couple of medications that we use with children who have anxiety disorders or OCD. So I'm going to talk about them kind of combined. But SSRIs, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, things like Prozac and Zoloft, and SNRIs, selective norepinephrine reuptake inhibitors, are two medications that we use pretty commonly with anxiety disorders, especially the SSRIs with OCD. So getting a little bit into the wonderful what is an SSRI and how does it actually work in the brain. So if you go back to your neurons, which hopefully you all remember from your PSYC classes, you have your presynaptic and your postsynaptic cell. So yeah, your first neuron and your second neuron. And you have your serotonin neurotransmitter that's in these, it's in the terminal button. And serotonin, once it kind of gets a signal from the rest of the cell, like, hey, we fired, that's great. The serotonin comes out of the presynaptic cell, goes into the synapse, and hangs on to the dendrite of the next cell, right? So the serotonin receptor goes, hey, serotonin is going to fit in here like a lock and key, and now if I get enough of that serotonin, it tells my next neuron to fire. It's all about firing, right? Well, what an SSRI does is it actually blocks reuptake. So this serotonin that's in the synapse eventually will come back up and have a reuptake into the presynaptic cell. So we want to recycle that serotonin. We don't just want it to hang out there. And so it's being recycled. But the SSRI blocks that channel so that what we see is that there's more serotonin in that synapse. So basically, SSRIs make it so there's more serotonin, and the reason why they do that is that they block that recycling. SSRIs are known not to be that quick working, so they don't really think it has to do with the serotonin itself, but it might instead have to do with growth of cells. So neuronal growth might be something that the SSRIs are actually doing. So oftentimes we call SSRIs antidepressants. And so when we talk about that, we often think, well, antidepressants do not work in kids with anxiety. But that is not true. It does work. And they have done studies with children from 5 to 17 years of age, decreased anxiety symptoms for all, a lot of disorders, generalized separation and social anxiety disorders, and they can show an effect in as short as 2 to 6 weeks. So these antidepressants are really not antidepressants. They're serotonin reuptake inhibitors. Those really do improve anxiety. And we see the same thing here with OCD. It's effective here too. So something you should know, though, that's just kind of interesting, is that children metabolize medications quicker than adults do. So they sometimes actually need more of medication than adults do, which I think is really fascinating. This is also not a quick treatment. It sometimes takes 2 months to start seeing the effects, especially with OCD. And the FDA has actually had 4 medications approved for OCD in children. And these last 3, Prozac, Luvox, and Zoloft, are all SSRIs. I think clomipirine is slightly different, but also works on the serotonin system. So that was just a little bit about OCD, what may cause it, and what some of our treatments are. So you'll learn more and hopefully watch a lot more and enjoy it. Okay, bye.